Daniel Hayes stepped out of Le Cirque restaurant into the chilly New York night. His custom-made Italian shoes clicked against the sidewalk as he headed toward his waiting limousine. Another successful business dinner, another multi-million-dollar deal closed. That's how life worked for him. Everything had a price, everything could be bought. The street was mostly empty, with only a few people hurrying past in their expensive coats. Daniel checked his Rolex watch. It was almost midnight. He had an early meeting tomorrow with his board of directors to announce the takeover of yet another struggling company. Life was good at the top. "Watch where you're going," someone shouted. Daniel looked up to see a small figure darting between people on the sidewalk. It was a boy, probably no more than 12 years old, wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days. His dark hair was messy, and his face was smudged with dirt. He was running straight toward Daniel. "Security!" Daniel called out, but before his bodyguard could react, the boy had reached him. Instead of trying to steal his wallet or watch like Daniel expected, the child did something completely unexpected. He grabbed Daniel's hand and kissed it. Daniel yanked his hand back as if he'd been burned. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp with anger and disgust. He pulled out his handkerchief and wiped his hand, glaring at the boy. But the child didn't run away. He stood there staring up at Daniel with large brown eyes that seemed too old for his young face. There was something familiar about those eyes, something that made Daniel's chest tighten uncomfortably. "I just wanted to know," the boy said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Know what?" Daniel snapped, though something in the boy's expression made him lower his voice. "What it feels like to kiss my father." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as he stared at the boy. "What did you say?" He managed to get out, his throat suddenly dry. The boy reached into the pocket of his torn jacket and pulled out a crumpled photograph. His small hands shook as he held it out to Daniel. "My mom kept this picture. She said you were my dad." Daniel took the photo with trembling fingers. The moment he saw it, his knees went weak. The image showed a younger version of himself, maybe 10 years ago, standing next to a woman he had tried very hard to forget, Maria Sanchez. She had been a waitress at a small diner he used to frequent before he made it big. They had dated for several months until his business started taking off, and he decided she didn't fit into his new lifestyle. He remembered the last time he saw her. She had tried to tell him something important, but he had been too busy, too focused on a major deal he was closing. He had told her they were done, that it was time to move on. He had his assistant change his phone number and made sure she couldn't contact him again. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Liam," the boy answered. "Liam Sanchez." "Where's your mother?" Liam's eyes filled with tears. "She died last year. Cancer. We couldn't afford the treatments." The words were like ice in Daniel's veins. Maria was dead. She had died poor and alone while he had been living in luxury just a few miles away. And their son, his son, had been left to fend for himself on the streets. "Mr. Hayes," his security guard interrupted, "should I call the police?" Daniel shook his head, unable to take his eyes off Liam. The boy was thin, too thin, and despite the dirt and raggedness, Daniel could see Maria's features in his face. But those eyes, those were Hayes' eyes, the same ones that looked back at him from the mirror every morning. "Where have you been staying?" Daniel asked, though he dreaded the answer. Liam shrugged, trying to appear brave despite his trembling lip. "Different places. Sometimes the shelter on 42nd Street when there's room. Sometimes—" He trailed off, looking down at his worn-out sneakers. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest. All these years, he had convinced himself that walking away from Maria had been the right choice for his career. He had built an empire worth billions, but standing here now, looking at this brave, broken child who was his own flesh and blood, none of that wealth meant anything. "How did you find me?" he asked softly. "Mom kept newspaper articles about you," Liam explained. "She never said anything bad about you. She just said you were very busy being important." He swallowed hard. "After she died, I started looking for you. I've been watching this restaurant for weeks because the articles said you eat here a lot." Daniel's driver and security guard stood awkwardly nearby, pretending not to listen to the conversation. The few passers-by gave them curious looks, but hurried past in typical New York fashion. "I'm sorry, Liam suddenly said, backing away. I shouldn't have. I just wanted to see you once. Mom said I looked like you, and I wanted to know if it was true. He turned to leave, his small shoulders hunched against the cold night air. Wait, Daniel called out, his voice cracking. He took a step forward and reached for the boy, his boy. Don't go. Liam stopped but didn't turn around. Daniel could see him trembling, whether from cold or emotion. He couldn't tell. Probably both. James, Daniel called to his driver, cancel my meetings for tomorrow. He walked over to Liam and gently turned the boy to face him. Kneeling down to eye level, he looked into those familiar brown eyes. Would you like to come home with me? We have a lot to talk about. Liam's eyes widened with hope and fear. Really? Daniel nodded, feeling tears burn his eyes for the first time in years. Really? I've missed too much already. I don't want to miss anything else. As they walked to the limousine together, Daniel kept his hand on Liam's shoulder, afraid the boy might disappear if he let go. His mind was already racing with all the things that needed to be done. Doctor's appointments, new clothes, school enrollment, legal paperwork. But for now, all that mattered was that his son was here. The city lights blurred as they drove through the streets of Manhattan. In the back of the limousine, Liam had fallen asleep, his head resting against Daniel's arm. Looking down at his sleeping son, Daniel made a silent promise to Maria and to himself. He would make this right. Money couldn't buy back the years they'd lost, but he would spend the rest of his life making sure Liam never felt abandoned again. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Daniel Hayes's penthouse apartment. Liam sat at the massive kitchen island, looking small and out of place in his ragged clothes. He stared in wonder at the plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him, as if afraid it might disappear. You can eat as much as you want, Daniel said gently. He had barely slept, spending most of the night making phone calls and arrangements. His personal assistant, Margaret Wilson, had already scheduled a doctor's appointment for later that morning and was working on finding the best private schools in the city. Liam picked up his fork with trembling fingers and took a small bite. His eyes widened at the taste, and he quickly took another bigger bite. Daniel's heart ached watching his son devour the simple breakfast as if it was the finest meal he'd ever had. When was the last time you ate? Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Liam shrugged, his mouth full of eggs. Yesterday morning. I found half a sandwich behind the deli on 36th Street. Daniel gripped his coffee mug so hard his knuckles turned white. The thought of his own child digging through garbage for food while he'd been dining at five-star restaurants made him feel physically ill. The elevator dinged, and Margaret walked in, her arms full of shopping bags. Good morning, Mr. Hayes. I picked up some clothes for the young man as requested. Liam's eyes grew wide as Margaret laid out new jeans, shirts, sweaters, and a warm winter coat on the kitchen counter. Are those for me? Of course they are, Daniel said. Why don't you try them on? The bathroom is down that hallway, first door on the right. As soon as Liam disappeared down the hall, Margaret turned to Daniel. I've arranged for Dr. Peterson to see him at 10 o'clock. I also contacted your lawyer, Mr. Richardson. He's preparing the paperwork to establish paternity and begin custody proceedings. What about school? Trinity School has an opening for next semester. They're willing to meet with you this afternoon. Given the unusual circumstances, Margaret hesitated. There's something else you should know. The press got wind of what happened last night. There are reporters gathering outside the building. Daniel cursed under his breath. Of course the media would be interested. Billionaire finds long-lost son. Living on streets was too good a story to ignore. Keep them away. From Liam, he ordered. The poor kid's been through enough. Liam emerged from the bathroom wearing new jeans and a blue sweater that made him look like any other middle-class kid. He had tried to smooth down his unruly hair, and his face was cleaner, though he still had the too thin look of a child who hadn't had enough to eat for a long time. The clothes fit okay? Daniel asked. Liam nodded, running his hands over the soft fabric of the sweater. I've never had new clothes before, he said quietly. Mum always got my stuff from thrift stores. Before Daniel could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Victoria Hayes, his mother. Daniel Anthony Hayes, his mother's sharp voice came through the speaker. Would you care to explain why I had to learn from the morning news that I have a grandson? Daniel sighed. Mother, I just found out myself last night. Is it true? Is he really Maria's son? Yes. Daniel looked at Liam, who was examining his new sneakers with fascination. He's my son. I'm sure of it. There was a long pause on the other end. Bring him to dinner tonight. Your father and I need to meet him. Mother, it's too soon. He's been through a lot. He's a Hayes, Victoria cut him off. If he's going to be part of this family, we need to start doing things properly. Dinner, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. The line went dead before Daniel could argue. He looked at Margaret. Helplessly, I'll adjust your schedule, she said efficiently. The school meeting can be moved to tomorrow. The doctor's appointment revealed what Daniel had feared. Liam was underweight and had several minor health issues from living on the streets. But Dr. Peterson assured them that with proper nutrition and care, he would make a full recovery. As they rode the elevator back up to the penthouse, Liam spoke softly. You don't have to do all this. Daniel knelt down to look his son in the eye. Yes, I do. I'm your father, Liam. I know I haven't been there for you, and I can never make up for that. But from now on, I'm going to take care of you. That's a promise. Liam's eyes filled with tears. I miss Mum, he whispered. Daniel pulled him into a hug, feeling the boy's thin shoulders shake with sobs. Tell me about her. What was she like these past years? Through his tears, Liam began to talk. He told Daniel how Maria had worked 2 jobs to support them, how she never complained even when things were hard, how she had kept teaching Liam to read and do math even when he couldn't go to school regularly, how she had stayed optimistic even when she got sick, telling Liam stories about his father and assuring him that someday they would meet. She never stopped loving you, Liam said. Even at the end, she said you were a good person who just got lost in your dreams. Daniel felt tears running down his own cheeks. Maria had been kinder than he deserved. While he had been building his empire, she had been raising their son with love and dignity despite their poverty. Mr. Hayes, Margaret interrupted gently, you need to start preparing for dinner with your parents. Daniel had forgotten about his mother's command performance. Looking at Liam's worn face, he made a decision. Call my mother, Margaret. Tell her we'll come another night. Liam needs rest. No, Liam said surprisingly firmly. I want to meet them. They're my grandparents, right? Daniel nodded, impressed by his son's courage. Yes, they are, but they can be a bit overwhelming. I'm not scared, Liam said, though his hand tightened on Daniel's arm. Mom always said family is important, as Margaret helped Liam pick out appropriate clothes for dinner. Daniel stood at his window looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Maria was watching. He hoped she could see that their son was safe now, that he would finally have all the opportunities she had dreamed of for him. But looking at Liam's brave face as he tried on a tie for the first time, Daniel wondered who was really getting the greater gift, the homeless boy who found his father, or the billionaire who discovered what truly mattered in life. The Hayes mansion stood like a fortress on the outskirts of the city, its iron gates and manicured lawns screaming old money and power. As Daniel's car pulled up the circular driveway, he felt Liam tense beside him. This is where you grew up? Liam asked, his eyes wide as he took in the enormous house. Yes, Daniel replied, straightening Liam's tie one last time. But it never really felt like home. The massive front door opened before they could ring the bell. Victoria Hayes stood there, elegant as always in a designer dress, her silver hair perfectly styled, her sharp eyes immediately focused on Liam, studying him with the same intensity she used to evaluate potential business acquisitions. Well, she said after a long moment, there's no denying he's a Hayes. He has your father's chin and your eyes. Hello, Mother, Daniel said, placing a protective hand on Liam's shoulder. This is Liam. Victoria's perfectly painted lips curved into what might have been a smile. Come in, both of you. Your father is waiting in the living room. They followed her through the marble-floored entrance hall into a room bigger than the entire apartment Liam had shared with his mother. Robert Hayes sat in his leather armchair like a king on his throne, a glass of scotch in his hand. So, Robert said, his voice as cold as the ice in his glass. This is the boy. Liam straightened his shoulders, and Daniel felt a surge of pride at his son's courage. Yes, sir, I'm Liam Sanchez. Hayes, Victoria corrected sharply. If you're Daniel's son, you're a Hayes. Mother, Daniel warned, but she waved him off. The boy needs to understand who he is now, she insisted. The Hayes name comes with responsibilities, expectations. Speaking of which, I've already called Harrison Prep. They'll take him next semester, assuming he can catch up to grade level. I haven't decided on schools yet, Daniel said. Don't be ridiculous, Victoria snapped. Every Hayes man for 3 generations has attended Harrison. It's tradition. I did well in school, Liam spoke up quietly. Before Mom got sick. She taught me herself when we couldn't afford the books anymore. Robert made a sound. That might have been disapproval or interest. It was hard to tell with him. Maria Sanchez, he said, rolling the name around like he was tasting a questionable wine. The waitress. Mom was smart, Liam said, his small hands curling into fists. She could have gone to college, but she had to work instead. She learned everything she could from library books so she could teach me. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Daniel saw something flicker in his mother's eyes. Maybe respect, maybe just surprise at Liam's defense of Maria. Dinner is served, announced Morton, the butler who had served the Hayes family since before Daniel was born. The dining room was intimidating with its crystal chandelier and antique furniture. Liam stared at the array of silverware beside his plate with panic in his eyes. Start from the outside and work your way in, Daniel whispered. Liam gave him a grateful look. Tell me, Liam, Victoria said, as the first course was served. What do you know about your father's company? I know it's one of the biggest technology companies in the country, Liam answered carefully. Mom kept newspaper articles about it. She said Dad was changing the world. And what do you want to be when you grow up? Robert asked, his first direct question to his grandson. Liam thought for a moment. I want to help people, he said finally, like the ones at the shelter who helped me and Mum when things got bad. They didn't have much, but they shared everything. Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. A charitable inclination is admirable, Victoria said, though her tone suggested she thought otherwise. But the Hayes fortune was built on business acumen, not charity. Maybe it's time for that to change, Daniel said quietly. Looking at his son, he continued. Liam has shown me there's more to life than just making money. Don't be naive, Daniel, Robert growled. This boy needs structure, discipline. He needs to learn what it means to be a Hayes. No, Daniel said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. He needs to be loved and supported. He needs to know his worth isn't measured by his bank account or his social status. I won't have you throwing away everything we've built. Robert slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses rattle. That boy needs to be properly educated, properly trained. That boy is my son, Daniel interrupted, standing up. And he's taught me more about courage and dignity in one day than I learned in 30 years of being a Hayes. Liam reached for Daniel's hand under the table, holding it tightly. The simple gesture gave Daniel strength. If you want to be part of Liam's life, he told his parents, you'll accept him as he is, not as another project to be managed or another Hayes to be molded. He's had enough hardship. What he needs now is family. Victoria dabbed her lips with her napkin, her face unreadable. You seem quite passionate about this. I am, Daniel said. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what matters. Robert stared at his son for a long moment, then turned his gaze to Liam. Something in his hard expression softened slightly. He does have spirit, Robert admitted. Reminds me of you at that age, before... He trailed off, but Daniel knew what he meant, before the pressure to be the perfect Hayes heir had crushed his spirit. Perhaps, Victoria said carefully, we could start with Sunday dinners, get to know each other properly. Liam looked up at Daniel questioningly. Daniel squeezed his hand. What do you think, son? Would you like to come back here sometimes? Yes, Liam said, but only if you promise to tell me stories about when Dad was little. Victoria's face softened into a genuine smile for the first time that evening. Oh, I have plenty of those. Did you know your father once tried to turn the pool into a marine biology laboratory? He was convinced he could teach the gardener's cat to swim. As Victoria launched into the story, Daniel watched his son's face light up with laughter. Even Robert chuckled at the memory. Something was changing in the cold Hayes mansion, something that had started with a brave little boy's kiss on a New York street. Later that night, as they drove back to the penthouse, Liam was quiet. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "I know they can be overwhelming." "They're not what I expected," Liam said thoughtfully. "They're kind of scary, but they're family, right?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, they are. And they'll learn to love you just as much." "As I do." The words slipped out naturally, but they made both of them freeze. It was the first time Daniel had said love to his son. Liam's eyes filled with tears. "I think Mum would be happy," he whispered. "She always said love was more important than money." Daniel pulled the car over and turned to face his son. Mom was a wise woman. I'm sorry I was too blind to see it back then. But I promise you, Liam, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for my mistakes." "I know, Dad," Liam said. And the simple word, Dad, made Daniel's heart swell. Mum always said people can change if you give them a chance. She was right about that too. As they drove home through the glittering city streets, Daniel thought about Maria. Somewhere he hoped she could see them, the lost billionaire and the homeless boy finding their way home together. The news spread through New York's elite, social circles like wildfire. Billionaire Daniel Hayes had a secret son, a boy found living on the streets. The story was too juicy to ignore, and everyone wanted a piece of it. Rebecca Sterling watched the morning news coverage with growing anger, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her designer sofa. She had been dating Daniel for 6 months, carefully planning their future together. Now this child had appeared out of nowhere, threatening everything. "I won't let some street urchin ruin my plans," she muttered, reaching for her phone. It was time to make some calls. Meanwhile, at Daniel's penthouse, Liam was having his first lesson with his new private tutor, Ms. Thompson. Daniel had hired her to help Liam catch up on the schoolwork he'd missed. "You have a natural talent for mathematics," Ms. Thompson said, smiling at Liam's quick work on the problems she'd given him. "Your mother must have been an excellent teacher." Liam's face lit up at the mention of his mom. "She used to make up stories to help me remember the multiplication tables. She said numbers were like magic. They could open doors if you understood them." Daniel, watching from his home office doorway, felt the familiar mix of pride and regret that had become his constant companion. Pride in his son's intelligence and resilience, regret for all the years he'd missed. His phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Rebecca Sterling is downstairs. She's insisting on seeing you." Daniel frowned. He hadn't spoken to Rebecca since finding Liam. She had left several angry voicemails about being embarrassed at social events, but he'd been too busy with Liam to deal with her drama. "I need to take care of something," he told Miss Thompson. "Will you be okay with Liam for a while?" "Of course, Mr. Hayes. We're making excellent progress." Daniel took the private elevator down to the lobby, where Rebecca waited in an outfit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "Daniel, darling," she purred, moving to kiss him. He stepped back. "What do you want, Rebecca?" Her perfect smile faltered slightly. "I want to understand what's going on. You haven't returned my calls. You missed the charity gala last week. And suddenly there are rumors about some child." "He's not some child," Daniel interrupted coldly. "He's my son." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure about that? I mean, anyone could show up with an old photo and a sob story." "Stop!" Daniel's voice was like ice. "I don't owe you any explanations, Rebecca, but I'm telling you now, stay away from Liam. We're done." "You can't be serious," she hissed. "You're throwing away what we have for some woman's bastard." Daniel grabbed her arm, his face dark with anger. "Don't you ever speak about my son that way again. Security will show you out. If you try to contact me or Liam, you'll regret it." As Rebecca was escorted away, she turned back with venom in her eyes. "This isn't over, Daniel. That boy will destroy everything you've built. Mark my words." Upstairs, Daniel found Liam and Ms. Thompson working on a science project. The sight of his son's happy face erased some of his anger from the confrontation with Rebecca. "Dad!" Liam called excitedly. "Ms. Thompson says I might be ready for advanced math classes soon." "That's wonderful," Daniel said, ruffling Liam's hair. "How about we celebrate with pizza tonight?" Liam's eyes lit up. Since coming to live with Daniel, he still got excited about simple things like ordering food or wearing clean clothes. It broke Daniel's heart every time. After Ms. Thompson left, they sat on the balcony eating pizza and watching the sunset over the city. Liam had been quiet for a while, something clearly on his mind. "Dad?" he finally asked. "Are you in trouble because of me?" Daniel nearly choked on his pizza. "What? No, of course not. Why would you think that?" Liam picked at his slice nervously. "I heard some people talking when we went to the park yesterday. They said I was ruining your reputation and that your company's stock was dropping because of me." Daniel set down his pizza and turned to face his son. "Listen to me, Liam. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important to me than you. The company, the money, what people think, none of that matters compared to having you in my life. But what if they're right?" Liam's voice was small. "What if I mess everything up?" Daniel pulled his son into a tight hug. "The only thing that was messed up was me before you found me. You showed me what really matters in life." But later that night, after Liam was asleep, Daniel sat in his office looking at his company's latest reports. Rebecca's visit had reminded him of the sharks circling in the water. His board of directors was getting nervous about the media attention. Some shareholders were questioning his focus, and his biggest competitor, James Morrison, had been unusually quiet lately. Never a good sign. His phone rang. Margaret calling at this late hour meant trouble. "Mr. Hayes," she said without preamble, "you need to see tomorrow's tabloid headlines. Someone leaked photos of Maria's old apartment, interviews with people who knew her. They're trying to paint her as a gold digger who planned this all along." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "Kill the story." "I can't. It's already gone to print." But that's not all. Someone's been digging into the old custody laws. They're claiming that since you never legally acknowledged Liam when Maria was alive, you might not have automatic parental rights now. The room seemed to spin. The thought of losing Liam now was unbearable. "Get me the best family law attorneys in the city," he ordered, "and find out who's behind this. Nobody threatens my son." After hanging up, Daniel went to check on Liam. The boy was sleeping peacefully, clutching the photo of Maria that he kept under his pillow. Looking at his son's innocent face, Daniel made a silent vow. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he whispered, "no matter what it costs me." But as he walked back to his office, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The wolves were gathering and they were hungry for scandal. The question was, how far would they go to tear apart a father and son who had only just found each other? The city lights twinkled outside his window, beautiful and cold. Somewhere out there, his enemies were planning their next move. But they didn't understand one thing. They weren't dealing with just a billionaire anymore. They were dealing with a father protecting his child, and that made Daniel Hayes more dangerous than ever before. The morning newspapers hit Daniel's desk like bombs. Every tabloid in the city had splashed Maria's story across their front pages. "Gold digger's last revenge," screamed one headline. "Hayes, heir or clever scam?" asked another. The photos of Maria's old apartment building, the interviews with supposedly former neighbors, it was all designed to create doubt. "Cancel all my meetings," Daniel told Margaret, "and get the PR team in here now." But before Margaret could respond, the elevator doors opened and Victoria Hayes stormed in, brandishing one of the newspapers. "I warned you this would happen," she said, throwing the paper on his desk. "The vultures are circling, Daniel. We need to take control of this narrative immediately." "I'm handling it, Mother." Victoria's perfectly styled hair seemed to crackle with energy. "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. We need to..." She stopped as Liam appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, his face pale. "Is it true?" he asked quietly, holding up his tablet. "Are they saying my mom was bad?" Daniel's heart broke at the pain in his son's voice. He crossed the room and knelt in front of Liam. "No, son. Your mother was a wonderful woman who loved you very much. These people, they're just trying to hurt us because they're jealous or scared." Victoria watched the interaction with an unreadable expression. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she walked over, and placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Your grandmother may be many things," she said, "but she does not tolerate attacks on family. Those vultures want a story. We'll give them one they won't forget." 2 hours later, the Hayes family PR machine was in full swing. Victoria had called in every favor, every connection she'd built over decades in New York society. By noon, positive. Stories about Maria began appearing online, interviews with her former co-workers at the diner, praising her work ethic and kindness, stories about how she'd helped other single mothers, sharing what little she had. But the biggest surprise came from Robert Hayes. The old man walked into Daniel's office unannounced, carrying a thick folder. "I had our investigators do some digging," he said gruffly. "Found something interesting about your friend Rebecca Sterling. Seems she's been working with James Morrison, feeding him information about our company for months." Daniel's blood ran cold. James Morrison was his biggest competitor, always looking for ways to take over Hayes Technologies. "She was planning to marry you," Robert continued, "then help Morrison stage a hostile takeover. When the boy showed up, it ruined their timeline. So the tabloid stories, Morrison's work through various shell companies. He's trying to discredit the boy, create enough doubt about his parentage to destabilize your position with the board." Daniel felt rage building inside him. "I'll destroy him." "We," Robert corrected. "We will destroy him. Nobody attacks a Hayes." Later that afternoon, Daniel sat with Liam in the penthouse living room. His son had been quiet all day, processing everything that was happening. "I'm sorry," Liam finally said. "I didn't mean to cause so much trouble." Daniel pulled him close. "You haven't caused any trouble. The trouble comes from bad people who care more about money than what's right, like the people who wouldn't help Mom when she was sick." The simple question hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. "Yes," he admitted. "Like them, like I used to be." Liam looked up at him. "But you're different now. Because of you and your mother. You both taught me what really matters." Daniel took a deep breath. "Which is why I've made a decision. Tomorrow I'm announcing the creation of the Maria Sanchez Foundation." Liam's eyes widened. "What's that?" "A charity in your mother's name. It will help single parents and their children who are struggling with medical bills or housing. No one should have to go through what you and your mother did." Tears filled Liam's eyes. "Mom would like that," he whispered. The elevator dinged, and Margaret rushed in, her usually calm demeanor shaken. "Mr. Hayes, there's a problem. Someone's trying to access Liam's adoption paperwork at the courthouse. They're claiming there might be another man listed as the father on his birth certificate." Daniel felt his heart stop. "That's impossible. Maria would have told me." "It's Morrison," came a voice from the doorway. Victoria stood there, her face tight with anger. "He's hired someone to forge documents. My sources at the courthouse confirmed it." "Can he do that?" Liam asked, his voice trembling. "No," Daniel said firmly, "because tomorrow morning we're going to the hospital for a DNA test. Once we have proof that I'm your father, no one can question it." "The results will take days," Margaret pointed out. "Then we'll weather the storm until they come," Victoria declared. "The Hayes family has faced worse." That night, unable to sleep, Daniel found Liam sitting in the kitchen looking at his mother's photo. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, sitting beside him. "Mum used to say that the truth always wins in the end," Liam said. "She said lies are like clouds. They look big and scary, but they can't last forever." Daniel smiled, amazed once again by Maria's wisdom. "Your mother was right, and you know what? Those people attacking us, they don't understand something very important." "What's that?" "That finding you wasn't just about DNA or legal papers. It was about finding the part of myself I lost when I let your mother walk away. The part that knew how to love more than money." Liam leaned against his father. "I'm not scared anymore," he said softly, "because we have each other now." Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy. Somewhere in a luxurious office, James Morrison was probably plotting his next move. Rebecca Sterling might be planning more revenge. The tabloids would keep trying to dig up dirt, but in the quiet kitchen of the penthouse, a father and son had found something stronger than all the money and power in New York. They had found the truth in their hearts. And like Maria said, the truth always wins in the end. The waiting room at New York Memorial Hospital was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel sat with Liam, both of them nervous about the DNA test they'd just taken. Victoria Hayes paced back and forth, her designer heels clicking against the tile floor. "Grandmother?" Liam asked softly. "Did you ever meet my mom?" Victoria stopped pacing. Something flickered across her face. Regret, maybe. "Once," she admitted. "She came to our house years ago. She was trying to reach your father." Daniel's head snapped up. "What? When?" "About a month after you changed your number. She was expecting." Victoria's voice grew quiet. "I sent her away. I told her we would make sure she was taken care of financially, but that she needed to leave you alone. You were about to close the merger that would make Hayes Technologies a global company." Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "You knew? All this time, you knew about Liam?" "I knew she was pregnant," Victoria corrected. "I didn't know. What happened after? She refused our money, said she wouldn't take anything that didn't come from you directly. She had dignity." The last word came out almost like praise. Liam stood up, his small face serious. "Mom said we didn't need money. She said we had something better. We had love." Victoria looked at her grandson, really looked at him, and for the first time in years, Daniel saw tears in his mother's eyes. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting our family's legacy. I didn't understand that you, Liam, you were the most precious legacy of all." The moment was interrupted by Margaret rushing into the waiting room. "Mr. Hayes, turn on the TV now." Daniel grabbed the remote and switched on the waiting room television. James Morrison's face filled the screen, standing at a podium for a press conference. "Concerned about the stability of Hayes Technologies under its current leadership," Morrison was saying. "With these questions about the CEO's heir and the company's resources being diverted to personal matters, the shareholders deserve better options." "He's making his move," Victoria said grimly. "He's using this situation to attempt a hostile takeover." "The board is calling an emergency meeting," Margaret added. "They're worried about the stock price dropping." Daniel felt torn. He needed to deal with this threat to his company, but he couldn't leave Liam right now. "Go," Liam said, surprising everyone. "Mom always said we have to face our problems head on. I'll be okay with grandmother." Victoria straightened her shoulders. "Yes, you will. And while your father deals with that snake, Morrison, we're going to do something even more important." "What's that?" Liam asked. "We're going to visit your mother's old neighborhood. Those people who knew her, who helped her, they deserve to know that their kindness wasn't forgotten." Daniel looked at his mother in amazement. The Ice Queen of New York society was proposing to visit the poorest part of the city. "Margaret, have the car brought around," Victoria commanded, "and call ahead to the Maria Sanchez Foundation office. I want to meet with the directors about expanding our support programs." As Daniel headed to his office to face the board, he felt stronger knowing his son was with his mother. Victoria Hayes might have made mistakes in the past, but she was fierce in protecting what she loved. And somehow, without anyone noticing, Liam had worked his way into her heart. The board meeting was tense. Morrison had done his homework, planting seeds of doubt about Daniel's ability to lead while dealing with personal drama. "The stock has dropped 15 points, one board member pointed out. "And this circus with the boy," another added. "It's damaging our reputation." Daniel stood up slowly, looking each board member in the eye. "That boy is my son, and yes, I failed him and his mother badly, but do you know what he taught me? He taught me that true wealth isn't just about money, it's about character." He pulled up a presentation on the screen. "These are the preliminary numbers for the Maria Sanchez Foundation. In just 2 days, we've had over 10,000 donations. Small amounts, mostly, from working people who remember Maria's kindness or who see themselves in her story." The board members murmured as they looked at the figures. "Morrison thinks he can use my son to destroy me," Daniel continued, "but he doesn't understand something crucial. Finding Liam didn't weaken me, it made me stronger. Because now I'm not just fighting for profits, I'm fighting for something that matters." His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. She'd sent a photo of Liam, standing outside his old apartment building. He was surrounded by former neighbors, all of them smiling, many with tears in their eyes. The caption read, "These people loved them when we failed to. We owe them a debt that can never be repaid, but we can try. Daniel showed the photo to the board. This is the real face of Hayes Technologies now, not just making money, but making a difference. Morrison wants to take over. Let him try, because I have something he'll never have, a reason to fight that's bigger than myself. The boardroom was silent for a long moment. Then the chairman, old Mr. Peterson, who had worked with Daniel's grandfather, spoke up. "When your grandfather started this company," he said slowly, "he had a sign on his desk. It said, 'Business without heart is just numbers.' Somewhere along the way, we forgot that." He looked around the room. "I move that we reject any takeover attempts and fully support both Mr. Hayes and the foundation." The vote was unanimous. As Daniel left the meeting, his phone rang. It was the hospital. The DNA results had been rushed through and they were ready. But somehow, looking at the photo of Liam surrounded by the people who had helped him and his mother survive, Daniel realized something. The test results didn't matter. Blood might make you related, but love makes you family. And Liam had taught all of them how to love again. The DNA test results lay unopened on Daniel's desk as the sun set over Manhattan. He'd been staring at the envelope for an hour, but somehow he couldn't bring himself to open it. The truth was, it didn't matter what the paper said. Liam was his son in every way that counted. His office door opened, and Rebecca Sterling walked in, ignoring Margaret's protests. "You can't keep avoiding me, Daniel," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold. "We need to talk." Daniel stood up slowly. "There's nothing to talk about. Security will escort you out." "Not before you see this." She dropped a folder on his desk. "Proof that your precious Maria wasn't the saint everyone thinks she was. She had other men in her life after you. Rich men. Any one of them could be Liam's father." Daniel picked up the folder and dropped it straight into his shredder without opening it. "You're working with Morrison. Did you really think I wouldn't? Find out." Rebecca's perfect smile faltered. "James Morrison understands business. He knows that sentiment has no place in the corporate world. That boy is making you weak." "No," came a voice from the doorway. "He's making him strong." Victoria. Hayes stood there with Liam slightly behind her. They had just returned from their visit to Maria's old neighborhood. "Rebecca, dear," Victoria said, her voice dripping with aristocratic disdain, "you seem to have forgotten something very important about the Hayes family." "And what's that?" Rebecca sneered. "We destroy those who threaten our own." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I just sent an interesting set of emails to the SEC. Seems someone has been engaging in insider trading, using information gained during private dinners with a certain CEO." Rebecca's face went pale. "You can't prove anything." "Can't I? I had Robert's best investigators following you for months. I knew you were wrong for my son from the start." Victoria smiled, but it was the smile of a shark. "The SEC will be very interested in your relationship with Morrison, as will the FBI." "You're bluffing," Rebecca whispered, but her hands were shaking. "Try me." Victoria's voice could have frozen fire. "Now get out of my son's office. And if you ever come near my grandson again, prison will be the least of your worries." After Rebecca fled, Liam walked over to Daniel's desk. His eyes fell on the unopened DNA test results. "You haven't looked at them?" he asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. "I was waiting for you. But Liam, no matter what they say, I know." Liam interrupted with a small smile. "We're family anyway." Together they opened the envelope. The medical jargon was complex, but the conclusion was clear. Daniel was, without any doubt, Liam's biological father. Victoria read over their shoulders and let out a small sound that might have been a sob. "Well, of course he is," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Just look at those Hayes eyes." Daniel hugged his son close, feeling tears in his own eyes. "Want to know something, Liam? Even if this paper had said something different, it wouldn't have changed anything. You're my son in here." He touched his heart. "Does this mean the bad people will leave us alone now?" Liam asked. "Morrison won't give up easily," Victoria warned, "but he's lost his main weapon. And speaking of Morrison," she smiled that shark smile again. "Robert and I have been doing some digging. It seems our friend James has some secrets of his own. Later that evening, as they rode home in the car, Liam told Daniel about their day in his old neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying, he said. She used to share her food with us when Mom was too sick to work. Grandmother gave her a job at the foundation. She's going to help other families like us. Your grandmother's full of surprises lately, Daniel mused. She told me about the day Mom came to see you, Liam said quietly. She feels really bad about sending her away. Daniel felt the old pain in his chest. We all made mistakes back then, but you know what? Your mom never gave up hope. She kept believing in love, in goodness. She taught you to be the same way. That's why we're starting the food program at the foundation, Liam said excitedly. Grandmother says we're going to make sure no kid goes hungry in Mom's old neighborhood. The car pulled up to their building, but instead of going straight to the penthouse, Daniel had the driver take them to Central Park. Why are we here? Liam asked as they walked through the darkening park. Your mother and I used to come here, Daniel said softly. We'd sit on that bench over there and talk about our dreams. She wanted to go to college, become a teacher. I was just starting my company full of big plans. He sat down on the old bench, patting the space beside him. I forgot those dreams somewhere along the way. Forgot what really mattered. Liam leaned against his father's side. But you remembered now. Because of you. Daniel pulled out an old photo he'd found in his office, him and Maria on this very bench, young and in love. Tomorrow, I'm announcing some changes at Hayes Technologies. We're starting a scholarship program for single parents who want to go back to school. It'll be called the Maria Sanchez Memorial Scholarship. Liam's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? And that's just the beginning. Your mother's name is going to help a lot of people, son. Her dream of teaching others, of making a difference, it's going to come true just in a different way than she planned. They sat there as the stars came out over Manhattan, a father and son on an old bench, full of memories. Somewhere, Daniel thought, Maria was watching, and maybe, just maybe, she was smiling. Dad, Liam said sleepily as they walked back to the car. I think Mom knew this would happen. What do you mean? She always said God works in mysterious ways. Maybe he knew you needed me to remember how to love. And maybe I needed you to help make Mom's dreams come true. Daniel looked at his son, this wise, loving boy who had somehow survived so much hardship without losing his capacity for forgiveness and hope. You know what, Liam? I think you might be right. As they drove home through the glittering city streets, Daniel thought about how much his life had changed since that night when a brave little boy had kissed his hand. Money, power, status, none of it meant anything compared to the miracle of finding his son, of rediscovering his heart. The war with Morrison wasn't over. There would be more battles ahead, but Daniel wasn't afraid anymore. He had something worth fighting for now, something more precious than all the wealth in the world. He had his son, he had his family, and he had a chance to make things right, to honor Maria's memory by becoming the man she had always believed he could be. The Maria Sanchez Foundation's first official event was held in the community center where Maria had once volunteered. The old building had been renovated, its worn walls now bright with fresh paint, its outdated facilities replaced with modern equipment. But the spirit of the place, the warmth and community that Maria had loved, remained unchanged. Daniel stood at the podium, looking out at the packed room. In the front row sat Liam, flanked by his grandparents. Victoria Hayes had traded her usual designer outfit for a simple blue dress, Maria's favorite color, Liam had told her. Robert Hayes actually smiled as he watched the children from the neighborhood playing with the new toys the foundation had provided. Many of you knew Maria Sanchez, Daniel began, his voice thick with emotion. You knew her as a friend, a neighbor, a mother who would give her last dollar to help someone in need. I knew her too once, but I forgot what she taught me about love and kindness. I forgot until our son brought me back. In the audience, Mrs. Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes. She now ran the foundation's food program, making sure no family in the neighborhood went hungry. Today, we're not just opening a community center, Daniel continued. We're continuing Maria's legacy of love and hope, Every child who comes here will have access to tutoring, healthy meals, and medical care. Every parent struggling to make ends meet will find support and opportunities for education and job training. Suddenly, the door at the back of the room burst open. James Morrison strode in, followed by a team of lawyers and reporters. "How touching," he sneered. "The great Daniel Hayes playing Santa Claus with his shareholders' money." Victoria started to rise, fury in her eyes, but Liam beat her to it. The boy walked calmly to the podium and took his father's hand. "My mom used to say that angry people are usually just sad inside," Liam said, his clear voice carrying through the room. "Were you sad like that, Mr. Morrison? Is that why you try to hurt people?" Morrison's face reddened. "Listen, kid. No, you listen." Robert Hayes stood up, his commanding presence silencing the room. "My investigators found something interesting in your past, Morrison. A woman named Grace Anderson. Ring any bell?" Morrison's face went pale. "That's none of your business." "She was your high school sweetheart," Robert continued relentlessly. "She got pregnant. You abandoned her just like you've abandoned every person who ever trusted you. The difference is, we found her. And your son." "My... what?" Morrison stumbled. "Backward. He's 25 now," Victoria added, her voice cold. "A good man despite having no father. Grace raised him well, working 2 jobs just like Maria. We've offered him a position at the foundation. He starts Monday." Morrison looked around the room wildly, seeing no sympathy in any face. The reporters he'd brought were scribbling frantically, but this wasn't the story he'd wanted them to write. "You set me up," he accused Daniel. "No, James, you set yourself up by choosing greed over humanity, by thinking money was more important than people." Daniel squeezed Liam's hand. "My son taught me what real wealth is. It's not in bank accounts or stock prices. It's in the hearts we touch, the lives we change." Mrs. Rodriguez stood up. "Maria used to share her lunch with my children when I couldn't afford food," she said. "She never asked for anything in return. That's the kind of person she was." One by one, people in the audience stood up, sharing stories about Maria's kindness, her strength, her unwavering faith in goodness. Morrison watched, his face crumpling as he realized how completely he had lost. "Your son," he finally said quietly. "Where is he?" "Right here," said a young man, stepping forward from the back of the room. He had Morrison's eyes, but Grace's kind smile. "Hi, Dad. I'm Thomas." Morrison stared at him, seeing 25 years of lost chances. I didn't know." "That's the difference between you and Daniel Hayes," Thomas said. "When he found out about his son, he changed his whole life to make things right. It's never too late to change, Dad. That's what this place is all about." The reporters' cameras flashed as James Morrison, the ruthless business titan, broke down in tears. His lawyers quietly left. The story they would write wasn't about a corporate takeover. It was about redemption, about second chances, about the power of love to change even the hardest heart. Later, as the children played and adults mingled over refreshments, Daniel found Liam sitting in a quiet corner, looking at his mother's photo. "You okay, son?" Liam nodded. "Mom would be happy. Not just about the foundation, but about Mr. Morrison too. She always said everyone deserves a chance to be better." Daniel sat beside him. "Your mother was the wisest person I ever knew. I just didn't realize it until it was too late." "It's not too late," Liam said, echoing Thomas's words. "Look around, Dad. Mom's love is still here, still helping people. It's like she never really left." Victoria joined them, sitting on Liam's other side. "I visited her grave this morning," she admitted quietly. "I apologized for sending her away that day. But you know what? I think she forgave me long ago. She raised you to be forgiving, to see the good in people. Even in cold-hearted old grandmothers," Liam hugged her. "You're not cold-hearted. You just forgot for a while like Dad did. But you remembered." Through the window, they could see Robert Hayes pushing a little girl on the new playground swing set, his usual stern expression replaced with genuine joy. Thomas Morrison was talking with his father in a quiet corner, years of pain and loss, gradually giving way to hope. "You know what the best part is?" Liam asked, looking around at the transformed community center. "What's that, son?" "Now other kids won't have to be hungry or scared like I was. Other moms won't have to work so hard, like my mom did." were making her dream come true, helping people, teaching them to love each other. Daniel pulled his son close, marveling at the wisdom in his young heart. The DNA test had proved what he already knew, that Liam was his biological son. But watching him now, seeing his capacity for forgiveness and love, Daniel knew Liam was truly Maria's child. And maybe that was the greatest gift of all. 6 months had passed since the opening of the community center. The changing seasons had brought more than just a transformation in the weather. They had brought healing to wounded hearts and hope to places where despair had once lived. Daniel sat in his office at Hayes Technologies, reviewing the latest reports from the Maria Sanchez Foundation. The numbers were impressive. Over 1,000 families helped, hundreds of children in after-school programs, dozens of single parents enrolled in college courses. But it was the stories behind the numbers that truly mattered. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hayes, James Morrison is here to see you." Daniel looked up in surprise. Since the confrontation at the community center, Morrison had stepped down as CEO of his company, focusing instead on rebuilding his relationship with his son Thomas. "Send him in." Morrison looked different, humbler somehow. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by casual business wear. The arrogant smirk had vanished from his face. "Daniel," he said quietly, "I need your help." "What kind of help?" Morrison sat down heavily. "Thomas and I, we're starting a foundation of our own for abandoned children and their mothers. We want to do what you're doing, but in other cities. But we don't know how to start." Daniel leaned back, studying the man who had once been his bitter enemy. "Why come to me?" "Because you understand something I'm just learning. Success isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference." Morrison's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas told me about his childhood, about how hard it was for his mother. Just like it was for Maria and Liam. I can't change the past, but maybe I can help change the future." Before Daniel could respond, Liam burst into the office, excited about something. He stopped short when he saw Morrison. "Hello, Mr. Morrison," he said politely. "How's Thomas?" Morrison's face softened. "He's good, Liam. Actually, he's getting married next month to one of the teachers at your community center." Liam beamed. "Miss Sarah? She's the best. She helps kids learn to read, just like my mom used to help me." Daniel watched the interaction, remembering how much had changed. 6 months ago, Morrison had tried to destroy them. Now here he was, humbled by love, seeking redemption. "The foundation always needs partners," Daniel said finally, "especially ones who understand firsthand why our work matters." Morrison's eyes lit up with hope. "You mean—" "Come to dinner tonight," Daniel said. "We can talk about it. Bring Thomas and Sarah." After Morrison left, Liam hopped onto his father's desk. "You're going to help him, aren't you? Like Mom would have." Daniel smiled. "When did you get so wise, son?" "Mom always said wisdom comes from the heart, not the head." Liam pulled out a slightly crumpled paper from his backpack. "Look what I got today." It was his report card from his new school. Rate. As with a special note from his teachers about his exceptional progress. Daniel felt his chest swell with pride. "We need to celebrate," he declared. "How about we invite everyone over, Grandma and Grandpa, Thomas and Sarah, Mrs. Rodriguez?" "Can we have it at the community center?" Liam asked eagerly. "In Mom's garden." The garden had been Victoria's project, a beautiful space filled with Maria's favorite flowers, where children could learn about nature and families could find peace. It had become the heart of the center, just as Maria had been the heart of her community. That evening, the garden was filled with laughter and love. Victoria Hayes, who once would have died rather than attend a casual potluck dinner, was serving. Her first attempt at homemade empanadas, taught by Mrs. Rodriguez herself. Robert Hayes sat with a group of children, telling them stories about his own childhood dreams of becoming a pilot before he joined the family business. The kids listened in wonder as the formidable businessman made paper airplanes with them. Thomas and Sarah sat with James Morrison, planning their wedding and the future of their new foundation. Sarah's engagement ring was simple. She had insisted that anything more expensive should go to the children's programs instead. Daniel watched it all from a quiet corner, marveling at how life could change. His phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. The board had unanimously approved an expansion of the foundation's budget. The Hayes name, once synonymous with cold corporate power, was becoming known for something else: compassion. "Dad?" Liam appeared beside him, holding something in his hands. "I found this in one of Mum's old books. It was a letter, written in Maria's neat handwriting but never sent. Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, but please know that I never stop believing in the good person you truly are. Our son has your strength and my heart, a perfect combination. Take care of him and let him teach you what I always knew, that love is the greatest fortune we can ever have. Forever, Maria." Daniel felt tears roll down his cheeks. Liam hugged him tight. "She was right about you," Liam whispered. "You just needed someone to remind you who you really were." From somewhere in the garden, a child's laughter rang out, pure and joyful. A butterfly landed on one of Maria's roses, its wings catching the last rays of sunset. "You know what, son?" Daniel said softly. "I think your mother is still teaching all of us. Every person helped by the foundation, every life changed. It's all because she believed in love more than money. And now everyone else believes it, too," Liam said, looking around at their gathered family. Not just those related by blood, but all the people whose lives had been touched by Maria's legacy of love. The garden glowed in the golden evening light, a peaceful haven in the heart of the city. Here, in this place built from love and hope, the true meaning of wealth was being taught every day, not in dollars and cents, but in kindness and second chances. Maria's dream had come true, though not in the way she had imagined. She had wanted to be a teacher, and now she was, teaching the world's most powerful people the simple truth she had always known, that love was the only fortune that truly mattered. 1 year had passed since that fateful night when a homeless boy kissed a billionaire's hand on a New York street. The city had changed since then. Or maybe it was the people who had changed, their hearts opened by a story of love and redemption that had touched thousands of lives. The Maria Sanchez Foundation was celebrating its first anniversary. The community center's garden was filled with roses in full bloom, and hundreds of people had gathered to mark the occasion. But first, Daniel Hayes had a surprise for his son. "Liam," he said, taking his boy's hand, "there's something I want to show you." They drove through the city streets, past the old neighborhoods where Liam and Maria had once struggled to survive. Finally, they stopped in front of a familiar building, the diner where Daniel had first met Maria all those years ago. "I bought it," Daniel said softly, "but not to tear it down or change it. Come inside." The old diner had been carefully restored, its worn surfaces polished, but its character preserved. On the walls hung photographs, Maria as a young waitress, her smile bright and hopeful. Maria with baby Liam. Maria helping at the homeless shelter even when she had so little herself. "This is the Maria Sanchez Learning Center," Daniel explained, "a place where people can come to study, to learn job skills, to get their GED or take college courses. Everything your mother dreamed of doing herself." Liam walked through the space in wonder. The old counter where his mother had once served coffee was now a computer station. The booths where tired workers had eaten cheap meals were now study spaces. But the spirit of the place, the warmth and hope that Maria had brought to it, remained. "There's more," Daniel said, leading Liam to a special corner. There, in a place of honor, hung Maria's old waitress uniform, carefully preserved in a glass case. Beside it was a plaque that read, "In memory of Maria Sanchez, who served more than coffee here. She served hope, love, and dignity to all who knew her. Her dream lives on in every life touched by her legacy." Liam touched the glass gently, tears rolling down his cheeks. "She would have loved this, Dad." "Yes, she would have." Daniel knelt beside his son. "You know, when you found me that night, I thought I had everything. Money, power, success. But I was empty inside. Your mother knew that wealth meant nothing without love. She taught you that, and you taught me." They drove back to the community center, where the anniversary celebration was about to begin. The place was packed with people whose lives had been changed by Maria's legacy. Victoria Hayes, elegant as ever, but with a new softness in her eyes, was teaching a group of young girls proper table manners while learning Spanish from them in return. Robert Hayes had become a regular volunteer, reading stories to children and sharing business lessons with aspiring entrepreneurs. James Morrison and his son Thomas had started similar programs in other cities, creating a network of hope that was spreading across the country. Thomas and Sarah were expecting their first child. They planned to name her Maria Grace, honoring both their families' stories of redemption. Mrs. Rodriguez ran the foundation's most successful program, teaching single mothers how to start their own small businesses. Maria always said everyone had a gift to share, she told anyone who would listen. We just helped them find it. As Daniel took the podium to address the crowd, he looked out at the faces before him. Rich and poor, powerful and humble, all brought together by the love of a woman who had never given up hope. 1 year ago, he began, I was a man who thought he had everything. Then a brave little boy taught me what true wealth means. He smiled at Liam, who sat between his grandparents. That boy led me back to the memory of a woman who knew that love was the greatest fortune we could ever have. He unveiled a new sign. Above the center's entrance, the Maria Sanchez Center for Hope, where every heart finds home. My son asked me recently if I thought his mother would be proud of what we've built, Daniel continued. The truth is, Maria was already proud. Proud of the son she raised to be compassionate, proud of the community that supported them, proud of the love that survived even in the hardest times. Liam stood up and walked to join his father at the podium. Together they looked out at their extended family, not just the Hayes clan, but all the people whose lives had been woven together by Maria's legacy of love. You know what Mum would say about all this? Liam asked, his voice clear and strong. What's that, son? She'd say that miracles happen every day. We just have to be brave enough to believe in them. As if in response to his words, a warm breeze swept through the garden carrying the scent of roses. Someone started singing Maria's favorite song, and others joined in. Soon the air was filled with music and laughter. In the garden's quiet corner, Daniel and Liam stood together by the memorial plaque that bore Maria's picture. I miss her, Liam said softly. Me too, Daniel replied. But you know what? She's not really gone. She lives in every person we help, every life we change. She lives in you, Liam, in your heart that's so much like hers. And she lives in me now too, because you helped me remember how to love. The sun was setting over New York City, painting the sky in colors as beautiful as Maria's dreams. In the growing dusk, the community center glowed like a beacon of hope, its lights promising shelter to anyone who needed it. A year ago, a homeless boy had kissed a billionaire's hand, hoping to find his father. Instead, he had started a revolution of love that was still spreading, touching lives and healing hearts, proving that the greatest wealth wasn't found in bank vaults or stock portfolios, but in the simple courage to love without conditions, to hope without limits, and to believe in the power of second chances. As father and son walked hand in hand through the garden Maria had inspired, they knew that some fortunes couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The real treasure was the legacy of love that would live on, touching life after life, generation after generation, as endless and beautiful as the roses that bloomed in Maria's garden. The end.